Perfect. So a couple of things. If you have a camera, if you could please keep it on, that would be fabulous. Please stay muted if you're not engaging in the conversation. If you have a pressing question during the presentation, by all means, ask it. You can use the raise your hand emoji, or please put the question into the chat box. If you can hold the questions back till the very end, that would be ideal. We have a lot of content to cover today, and Claire, myself, and the rest of the Benefits Trust team would be happy to stay around to help facilitate that and getting any of your questions answered. So with that said, I am going to pass the floor over to Claire Winstanley.
Morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. As Lindsay mentioned, I'm the Director of Underwriting here at the Benefits Trust. I've been working here for about 23 years, and so had my hands in a lot of pies over the years, and this is where I am right now. Today, we're going to be focusing on Formulary Protect and Protect Plus. These are, we'll talk a little bit more about what they are obviously in detail, but I'm hoping that it'll be interesting for everyone. So looking forward to it. We'll just get right on it. So Formulary Protect and Protect Plus. We're going to talk a little bit starting right from the beginning to give the conversation a little bit of context. We're going to focus on the Benefits Trust specific approach in collaboration with Claim Secure. So let's all remember that this is a discussion based on an ASO funding model and not an insured arrangement, and that it's based on Claim Secure's formularies and clinical services. So we'll talk a little bit about what a formulary is, why we want to use one in a benefits program, what's covered under a formulary, how Formulary Protect and Protect Plus differ from each other, how we can help people who lose coverage when these kinds of plan designs are implemented, what the process looks like, and how this impacts plan pricing and plan design. So what's a formulary? Simply put, it's a list. How does it work? These lists determine which drugs are or are not eligible for coverage under a particular client's prescription drug plan design. There are standard lists that many of us are familiar with, and that kind of gets the group started with a basic coverage, and then clients adjust them as they need to. So adding vaccines or fertility treatment, habit-breaking drugs, smoking cessation, that kind of thing. So these lists are constantly changing. They are identified by DIN number, so they are very specific listings, but you won't see them all written out in any kind of contract because it all kind of happens in the background. As new drugs enter the marketplace, they're added to these lists in the appropriate categories by the carriers. Every plan with a drug coverage has a formulary of some kind. All plans include a list of eligible medications based on the contract inclusions and exclusions, and the carrier's review of the efficacy and the cost of each drug. Some lists are well known throughout the industry, others are a little more subtle, but overall, these are the terms upon which claims are adjudicated in a particular prescription drug plan design. Common examples of formularies would be RAMQ, a generic plan design, the Ontario Drug Benefit, and Trillium coverage. So why do we need a formulary? As part of a larger plan design, a formulary can help clients reach their benefit goals. Those goals might include assisting their employees financially, narrowing or expanding the scope of the coverage, or managing their benefit costs. And for a client who wants to minimize the number of high-cost medications paid under the plan, we can introduce a Formulary Protect or a Formulary Protect Plus plan design. Formulary Protect and Formulary Protect Plus plan designs exclude specialty drugs as defined by Claim Secure. These are drugs where the annual cost is expected to exceed $10,000 per year. This assumes a standard dosing protocol and includes familiar names like Remicade, Inflectra, Humira. It also includes drugs that are part of a combination type therapy. So for example, early HIV medications often included multiple medications, but each one might not individually reach that $10,000 level. They were designed to be used together though, so you would exceed $10,000 with 2 or 3 medications that were used in combination together. They do not exclude medication where the standard dosing would cost less than $10,000 per year. So there are some times where we might still find that somebody would exceed that $10,000 threshold. It could be individual patients who have individual needs relating to the medication that they're taking. They may take more medication for their condition than the average person, which doesn't get captured in that $10,000 threshold. Patients may also have multiple conditions, and so they might be taking different medications that aren't necessarily connected to each other, but that overall would accumulate to more than $10,000 a year. So it is possible to have Formulary Protect or Formulary Protect Plus in place and still have someone exceed that $10,000 threshold. I use the example of medications that are dosed by weight that can vary by individual overall. Several unrelated medications, but these are generally rare occurrences. We don't see them happening very often. So we talk about Formulary Protect and Formulary Protect Plus in the same breath. Well, what's the difference between them? Formulary Protect does not include coverage for specialty drugs. Period, end of story. Formulary Protect Plus does not include coverage for specialty drugs if there is another funding source available. So Formulary Protect Plus plans could pay for a specialty drug, but only if all other funding sources have been exhausted. Other funding sources might include things like spousal coverage, patient assistance programs, the Trillium Drug Benefit, or other provincial drug programs. So how do we find other funding sources? Coverage navigation is our solution to that, or ClaimSecure's solution to that. This helps patients who are limited by Formulary Protect or Formulary Protect Plus investigate each possible funding source to obtain alternate coverage for their medication. So it's run by ClaimSecure. It can be used with an existing claim when a group adds Formulary Protect or Protect Plus to their coverage. It can be used for existing claims coming from another insurance provider. So if a new group is joining the Benefits Trust and has existing claims that they want to address through Formulary Protect or Protect Plus. And it can be used by patients who have a new diagnosis or a new need for a specialty drug, where Formulary Protect or Formulary Protect Plus are already in place on the plan. Depending on the group size, the Benefits Trust may absorb the cost of the service. There is a small charge for it. Medications that have not been approved to be eligible under any ClaimSecure plan would not be included in the coverage navigation service. So going back to the idea that each carrier reviews the efficacy and the cost of new medications, all carriers, including ClaimSecure, would determine if a new medication would qualify as eligible under their plan. So they assess the efficacy, the cost effectiveness, the method of treatment, the category the medication falls into, like is it an antibiotic or a painkiller or a biologic? And for very expensive medications, they may also assess the availability of other sources of funding. If a medication is not added to their overall formulary, then ClaimSecure wouldn't support coverage navigation for that particular drug, because typically there would be another medication or another resource available for that funding arrangement. We do have an alternative service provider called Copay Care. Should we require additional assistance for a particular situation that isn't captured under the coverage navigation offering, there's a cost to the client for the Copay Care service, but usually that cost is well offset by the overall savings under the plan of actually getting this medication off onto another platform or another funding source. So what does it look like for the member under a Formulary Protect arrangement? What's going to happen if they have a high cost drug and Formulary Protect is in place for that particular plan? So the member might have a high cost drug claim. We'll put them in contact with the coverage navigation department with ClaimSecure, and coverage navigation will investigate all of these options that might be available for funding. So spousal plan coverage, patient assistance program availability, or drug eligibility under Trillium. They'll help the individual complete master applications for those particular plans as is appropriate, and submit them to the appropriate places in order to have them covered. Typically, the spousal plan is kind of the first set or the first place where we go to verify any coverage. So if there's spousal coverage available and it's covered by the spousal plan, then the spousal plan is going to pay for the drug. Typically, we may have a copay involved or something. So there may be additional amounts that need to be covered with the assistance of either the patient assist or Trillium. And so these processes, again, are happening kind of at the same time, and we're sort of waiting for responses to determine which takes precedence over the other. So if it's covered, the spousal plan will pay. If it's not covered, we go back to the patient assistance program, continue that process, and connect with Trillium to make sure that that process is moving as well. If it is covered under Trillium, then Trillium will pay. There's obviously a dollar value, like income test to that, and so a deductible involved for Trillium. If it is not covered by Trillium for some reason, generally everything kind of comes back to that patient assistance program. They'll apply for coverage. If the patient assistance program does cover the medication, either in whole or in part, they'll pay their portion. And if not, then the member pays any remaining value. For Formulary Protect Plus, the experience is very much the same, with one notable difference. So you start your high-cost drug claim, you go through all of the navigation, but should the claim not be covered by the spousal plan, not be covered by Trillium, and not be covered by the patient assistance program, they can apply for special authorization for coverage through the Benefits Trust program. Now, most people are familiar with special authorization, but a quick review. Special authorization ensures members meet the medical criteria for the use of a medication. They need to have an approved condition for the medication. They need trial and failure of primary or less expensive treatments. And they need to be conforming to Health Canada approved dosing, or they may be limited to Health Canada approved dosing if they are utilizing more than is approved by Health Canada's recommendations. This process protects the plan from off-label or experimental providing or prescribing. For medications with multiple uses, it'll confirm the reason for the use and compare that to eligibility under the plan. So for a medication that might have multiple purposes like Botox, which can be used for excessive sweating or chronic migraines, but it would be approved, but it would be declined if it's being used for TMJ dysfunction, which is a disorder of the jaw, or if it's for cosmetic purposes, for example. Ozempic's another, hot topic one right now. If it's being used for type 2 diabetes, it would be okay. If it's being used for weight loss, then Health Canada hasn't approved it for that purpose, and so it would be declined. Typically, the special authorization process applies to higher cost medications, but it can be used to verify the usage of less expensive medications, just like the Botox example, where that's only going to run $2,000 or $3,000 a year. So the member experience for the special authorization process sort of flows as is shown on the screen here. The member may have a special authorization drug claim. They'll be referred to apply for special authorization and submit an application form with a number of medical details on it so that the clinical team at Claim Secure can do a full review of the medication and the situation to determine if the member meets those medical criteria that they've assessed to be appropriate for that medication. If it is covered and if they are approved, then the benefit plan would pay for the medication, obviously according to the plan provisions. If it's not covered, the spousal plan will typically come into play here or may be an option. If there is no spousal plan in place, then the medication is not covered and the member will ultimately be responsible for the cost if they choose to continue with the treatment. So how does this affect the pricing? When we're thinking about pricing impact, we have to keep in mind that Formulary Protect and Formulary Protect Plus are plan designs. The ultimate cost of a plan in an ASO arrangement is the total claims paid plus the administration fees. Your plan design dictates what can be paid and how much, and then more restrictions obviously will generally result in fewer claims. So the impact of adding Formulary Protect or Formulary Protect Plus is directly related to the group's current usage and the expected usage under the new plan design. There's typically a reduction in the stop loss cost when this type of plan design is implemented, and the impact of that depends on which plan design is chosen ultimately. So for the plan design itself, when do we want to use these options? Well, when we want to limit the existing high cost claims and get plan costs under control, when we want to prevent exposure to high cost claims in the future, so we may not have any right now, but we're looking forward to protecting the plan from additional risk going forward. And ideally, we would put it in place in that situation. That way, we've got it set up so that there's a limit to the perceived impact for the member. If somebody gets cut off, it feels very different from someone who has a new drug and then finds that they have to go through X, Y, or Z process in order to review the eligibility under the plan. So it changes how the member perceives the impact of that plan design. So how do you know which one to choose? Depends on the client's goals and priorities. So choose Formulary Protect to eliminate as many high-cost situations as possible, and choose Formulary Protect Plus to eliminate most high-cost situations, but still ensure members are being taken care of. A lot of this goes back to how the employer or how the plan sponsor views the benefits program and their contribution to the employee's welfare. So with everything, there's got to be a downside, right? Employees may feel abandoned or targeted with either option, particularly if they have a high-cost drug already in place or already being claimed. Employee participation is required in this process. This coverage navigation process requires them to complete forms and to, be mindful of responding to emails, etc. A lack of participation or commitment can hamper the process, can delay the process. With Formulary Protect, employees may have to figure out how to cover the cost of the medication themselves if other coverage cannot be found. And with Formulary Protect Plus, high-cost claims could still be paid through the benefits plan, which ultimately costs the employer a little bit more in the way of plan expenses. So how does this integrate with the stop loss component? And I'm going to kind of go through this assuming that folks have a basic understanding of stop loss, which is an insured umbrella to protect the plan from catastrophic claims. Because again, we're talking about ASO programs here. So this is a self-funded arrangement. Somewhere along the way, you want to have that protective layer to make sure that the employer isn't at unlimited risk for claims in general. So the need for stop loss is moderated with these plan designs. So keep in mind, stop loss covers cumulative claims for one patient. It includes hospital, nursing care, and prescription drug expenses. So under Formulary Protect, claims for one patient could still reach the stop loss threshold. Other types of claims could contribute to a stop loss claim overall. So you may have say $7,000 worth of prescription drug claims, but you may also have a hospital claim that pushes that up and over the stop loss threshold. Under Formulary Protect Plus, medications that are approved through the special authorization process in the absence of other funding options would be considered to be stop loss eligible, and so would continue to be paid through the plan. And again, you could have a stop loss claim that's made up strictly of a prescription drug expense, or that may include additional hospital or nursing care expenses. Are there nuances and exceptions? Of course there are. Pre-existing conditions will still limit stop loss eligibility. So it's key to remember that whether it's a new group that's joining Benefits Trust or a new member joining an existing plan, if they've been taking this medication before, or if they've been medicating the same condition before, the cost of those medications, obviously under the specialty drug definition, will not be stop loss eligible. So grandfathering for a new group's transition period would therefore be funded by the client because, again, you're talking about grandfathering existing claims that are coming into the Formulary Protect or Protect Plus arrangement. This could be up to 90 days. It's determined by the client. We usually see 60 or 90-day grandfathering period. And grandfathering existing claims on an ongoing basis, if that's what the client wants to do, when they introduce a Formulary Protect or Protect Plus arrangement, would also be funded by the client. So you're looking at having, no impact to the employees who might have a high cost claim already, and affecting only new employees. Those existing claims are going to need to be funded by the client. Any other exceptions that are made by the client would also be funded by them. So if they have, executive who they want to not burden with this particular situation, or somebody that they want to make an exception for because they don't meet the clinical criteria, something like that, then again, the client's going to be taking responsibility for that. There are lots of situations where existing insured arrangements may have the client paying well more than the total cost of these high cost medications. So sometimes grandfathering that and continuing to pay for those medications on a self-funded basis is still less expensive than continuing with the insured alternative. Just depends on the client themselves and their particular situation. So what should clients be thinking about when considering Formulary Protect or Protect Plus? They want to think about whether there are any current high cost claims, how they want to address those or treat those high cost claimers. Are these medications included in the coverage navigation service, or are we talking about maybe pulling copay care into that arrangement? How long would they grandfather existing claims for, allowing members time to get other funding arrangements in place? What's the estimated cost of that transition period so that they're prepared for the potential outlay initially on the plan, and then know that these claims will ultimately peter off as other funding sources become available. And how will the employee population respond? It's important to think about how your population looks at benefits and how they respond to any kind of plan design changes, as that might affect how you want to communicate this type of change to the group as a whole. So what do we need to do in order to review and comment on the impact of Formulary Protect or Protect Plus at the Benefits Trust? So if we're going to look at a group for you who you may want to introduce this kind of plan design for, we need some detailed claim reports, includes the names of the drugs and the number of high claimers involved in the plan. The client's preferred approach to those existing high claimers. Are we continuing to cover them? How long is the transition period? All those things that we just talked about. And any grandfathering will require the names of the affected members and the medications they are taking in order to execute. So if I need to say that somebody needs to continue to be paid for a particular medication, I need to be able to identify who that person is and what the drug is that they're taking in order to make that exception. So in summary, Formulary Protect and Protect Plus are plan design tools that help clients manage their prescription drug expenditures and control their benefit costs. They force the majority of claims to other funding sources, including private and public programs. The only difference between them is whether the plan will cover a medication if there are no other funding options available to a particular patient. And support is available to assist the patients who take these medications that may be limited by the new plan design. Thank you very much.
That was great, Claire. Thank you. Do you want to just stop sharing your screen? And some great questions came in. So I've asked everyone that we were going to hold them off so that everyone can hear your fabulous answers.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Okay.
So the first question is from Drew. He said, "Can we have Formulary Protect for an all other class, but have 100% coverage with no restrictions, i.e., pay as presented for an executive class? Let's say for 100 life group." And he's speaking to Formulary Protect Plus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, a classic example of the regular, plan design. You're just introducing that threshold and that listing of medications that are going to be limited for coverage under the plan. Kind of think of it as the same thing as saying, oh, but we're not going to cover fertility treatments, or we're not going to cover anti-obesity treatments. You're saying we're not going to cover medications that generally run over $10,000.
Perfect. Does that answer your question, Drew? Yeah. Perfect. And then Drew had another question. So it says, does Benefits Trust or Claim Secure measure the percentage of acceptance of high cost drugs approved by TDP or pharma rebates?
I don't know about Claim Secure. We don't. I haven't seen that many instances in general where the medication doesn't get covered by another funding source. And I think this is still something that's a bit in its infancy, so we haven't got enough groups that are implementing it and using those transitions or needing those transitions to be able to kind of judge on a general basis that way.
Okay, perfect. So Cheryl Jones was asking, is the copay care cost a percentage of the cost of claim, or specifically, is it a flat rate per claim?
It's a flat rate per claim.
And she's asking what the cost of the claim of that claim, or what the flat rate would be.
It may depend on the claim itself. Typically, I see something in the few $1,000 range, up to $5,000. But again, it often offsets the overall cost of this particular expense that's coming to your plan anyway. So, from that perspective, you kind of recover it within a year, with the savings that you offer the plan by not having that drug on the plan anymore.
So, like in the case of like a Trikafta claim,
Right.
$1,000 would be
Well,
nothing.
and even a claim that would have stop loss coverage, in its existing format or its existing condition, you usually have a $10,000 deductible on that. So a $5,000 expense, in order to remove $10,000 of client responsibility, is you're gonna claim it back very quickly, or you're gonna recover that very quickly.
Right. Perfect. Okay. And Sean's question was, are special auth claims handled by this are special auth claims handled by the same Formulary Protect navigation service?
So coverage navigation is specific to finding other funding sources for a medication. Special authorization is a separate process where the individual's condition and their history as far as claims and medications that they've attempted, any other comorbidities, so other conditions that might come into play, are assessed by the clinical department at Claim Secure in coordination with the underwriting department here, and confirm. And basically, we're confirming whether or not the individual meets the clinical criteria for taking the medication. So if a medication is designed for, I'm trying to think of a good example. I think I'll go back to the Ozempic example of medications designed for type 2 diabetes. We know it's being used off label for weight loss. We're going to see that come through the system, and we're going to say, okay, the diagnosis for this particular individual is obesity. It's not going to be eligible under the plan because it's not approved as a weight loss medication. If it's a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, then they're going to be looking at what else they've tried, whether they're using it in coordination with metformin, for example, and several other components of that condition to say, okay, your diabetes is sufficiently severe and uncontrolled that Ozempic is a reasonable treatment for it.
Right. Thanks, Claire. Okay, the next question is from Rob. What are the potential implications if a group has a member with high cost claims and then implements either of these designs? Could there be any legal or contractual considerations to be aware of?
I think certainly in the case of a union contract, one needs to tread carefully around that. If you've got a CBA, then you really need to make sure that there's nothing specific or that defines specifically what the formulary can look like. But this can also be a way around very specific restrictions when this kind of thing isn't actually identified in a CBA. So I still think treading carefully is a good call. Each client would probably need to review with their own legal team if they think there's any concerns. Um, but the reality is, these formularies, these lists of eligible medications, they exist in every single plan, and they differ from carrier to carrier and from client to client. So, even when you switch carriers on a standard traditional insured arrangement, you're going to find that there are slight differences between what, big green covers versus big blue. You're going to have some of those nuances because each carrier has that responsibility and has that right as a carrier to say, okay, these are the medications that we consider to be eligible under a given program, and obviously categorize them accordingly for inclusions and exclusions.
And Rob put in addition to constructive dismissal. I'm not sure, Rob. I think we'd have to that would be more from a legal standpoint or employment.
Yeah, that would be an employment law question. But no, we certainly haven't seen anything that suggests that, people have taken this to that sort of constructive dismissal sort of set. It does make it easier when you're transitioning from another carrier to the benefits trust, but can you make the same argument over covering or not covering paramedicals or removing dental from the program? Probably not. So, can you really make the same argument for prescription drugs? The fact that the client is offering that to their employees is an enhancement for the employee themselves. Unless there's something specifically written in the employment contract that says, we promise to provide you with 100% drug coverage that isn't limited, even if it's a large claim, then okay, you might be running into a bit of an issue. But it would have to be a very specific comment in order to truly make a legal argument that you cannot make the change.
Perfect.
I think I'll also add that I think clients will know if they have employees who are inclined to push that button. So conduct yourselves accordingly.
Does that answer your question, Rob? Good. Yeah, thumbs up.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
The next question is from Cheryl Claire. Would existing high-cost drugs currently covered through a patient support program be grandfathered if the case was transitioned to Formulary Protect Plus program?
Chances are, if an existing expense is being covered by a patient support program, there's something that's limiting it under the existing program, or under the existing benefits plan. So maybe that's 80% reimbursement. Maybe it's, some other kind of restriction. But chances are, if they're already part of the mix, that's not going to change unless perhaps the amount that they contribute increases. The patient assistance programs are also very good at trying to utilize other funding sources before their outlay. So that likely means that there's been at least some discussion as far as Trillium is concerned. There may not be sufficient out of pocket for Trillium to come into play in the existing plan, which could change if you introduce a Formulary Protect or Protect Plus to the existing plan. Does that answer the question?
Cheryl, I can't see you on the screen, but does that what you were asking?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Cheryl. The next question, Claire's from John. Is using special auth with Formulary Protect Plus after Trillium declines the claim an issue? Did I say that right, John?
I mean, that's part of the process. Is if Trillium's not going to cover the medication and patient assist isn't going to cover the whole cost, that the special authorization process would come into play. Yes, it's an extra step. We often find if it's not covered under Trillium that there's some sort of clinical rationale, and so they may or may not qualify under the clinical restrictions or clinical requirements through that special authorization program, but it's very specific to the member itself, their situation itself, and the drug and the condition itself. Does that help?
Do you want to add more to that, John?
Or clarify if you need.
So my concern is if we say there's no coverage for this drug in order to get Trillium to look at it, and then Trillium says no, and then we said, oh yes, but there is coverage, maybe.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the way that the contract, the language is constructed, it says that the medication is not covered unless all other funding sources have been exhausted. And so it does allow for it to push off. And then if Trillium says, oh, well, it's not covered. In the end, if Trillium's not going to cover it anyway, what do they care if somebody else is going to potentially pick it up after the fact, right? Because it means that it's not a medication that the member itself would qualify for. Maybe they earn too much money, or maybe it's just a clinical issue. That help?
So there's no more questions, Claire, in the chat. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to ask or bring up while Claire is with us today?
Did I miss it? Somebody asked what the program costs. I don't remember if that was answered.
Yeah, the Claim Secure program itself has a fairly small cost, and often we will absorb that. Off the top of my head, it's a couple $100s, I think, because they do it on a grand scale on a constant basis. Copay Care is a more specialized program, more of a white glove kind of service, and so that can cost around $5,000 for the full beginning to end, whatever it is that's required for the member.
Is that per annum or per year?
Oh, that's just one time. Just one time.
Oh, it's a one-time $5,000 charge. And is it also a one-time $200 charge?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's not bad. That's not bad at all.
No, it really isn't. You go ahead, Rob. Next.
I just want to follow up on my constructive dismissal question, and
Sure.
and you mentioned that some specific wording might have to be in the contract. I'm tending to disagree a little bit, because if someone's on a drug that's, pick a number, whatever you want to pick, $100,000 a year, whatever, and all of a sudden now they're not getting coverage for that, that's quite a change in their agreed upon employment payment, right? Because we all of us probably say benefits are form of compensation or some form of that. And if you're offering benefits and it was at even 80%, 100%, whatever the co-insurance is, and now you're saying you're not covering you for this drug, that's quite a drastic change in their employment compensation.
Perhaps, but the employment contract, when you first are joining the plan, or you're first joining your employer, your employment contract doesn't say, oh, hey, by the way, I have $100,000 worth of drugs that need to be covered. And I think, look at the potential alternative. What if the employer's situation is such that they say, okay, great, here's the experience under our plan. Sorry, folks, we can't afford to offer a plan anymore. Everybody's plan gets stopped and they have nothing. I don't think you can, I don't think there's a legal argument to force your employer to provide a benefits coverage in general. But like I said, you're talking CBA and it has specific requirements or specific parameters that it lays out as to the nature of or to the value of benefits that are provided to the member. You're absolutely looking at something you want to tread carefully, make sure that you're including all of the appropriate things and still following the letter of that agreement. The other side of it is, let's keep in mind that we're trying not to cut these people off. We're trying to find somebody else to pay it. And so from the member perspective, hopefully they recognize that it's okay, this isn't going to be covered under the plan anymore, but here's who is going to start paying for it. And so hopefully you're not you're not losing out overall on the payments that you're receiving. They're just not coming from your employer directly anymore.
Yeah, I've worked with this plan before. It is a good plan, but it's just, and I'm not challenging you, obviously. I'm just stating a fact. It's not as easy as you're making it sound sometimes.
Yeah.
That's
Again, it's going to be
because
client.
even if you take it away from all your employees, that is more quote unquote fair than taking coverage away from one employee. You have less of a legal risk, in my opinion, and I'm
Yeah.
not a lawyer, if you have to remove it from all 50 of your employees versus one because just the one is on the high cost drug.
Mm. I mean, you're right. And it's going to be a client specific situation.
Correct.
And like I said, we talk about the ideal time to put this in place being before there's a claim.
Absolutely, 100%. Once if you get it in before there's a claim, then it works perfectly.
Yeah. But you are applying the same rules to everyone, so
right.
It should be, reasonable. Again, you can have an argument about including this or that. You're just excluding these drugs that cost more than $10,000.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Sean.
Maybe I should unmute myself. Thank you, Claire. I think I had some connection issues about halfway through, and if someone else, maybe if it was you, then other people will benefit. But there was a point in the presentation where you were talking about how if grandfathering was something that the employer wanted to do, it may end up being cheaper. And I wasn't sure about the connection there, and I don't, or if I got it right. But if you could clarify that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're talking about grandfathering, we're talking about taking on an existing claim or paying that existing claim outside of the parameters of what the plan is actually laying out. Hey, we're not covering this drug anymore, except for you, because we're going to keep covering it for you because you had it before, right? So that can happen on a temporary basis in order to allow them to have time to find those other funding sources. And in some cases, employers prefer to say, look, we don't want to mess with what this person has. Maybe they're an executive, maybe they're a long-term employee. Everybody knows that, he's the high claimer or she's the high claimer. So they just want to continue to cover the medication. At an insured carrier, your premiums are going in, they're covering whatever it is that gets paid out of the plan. In some cases, that pricing is so high that you're still paying more than you would if you just paid that claim yourself. And so, again, it's a very specific situation. It depends on the client, it depends on their current arrangement, and it depends on how much they're being charged by the carrier. But you could run into a situation where it's worthwhile to set this up and still grandfather somebody because maybe you get rid of a handful of claims and the overall cost of actually paying it out of pocket is less than what the current insurance carrier is charging you.
Versus the current insurance. Okay, thank you.
There's one last question, Claire. It's from Carol. Once a claimant is approved for alternate funding, is there an annual review of that eligibility, or once you're on, you're on?
You mean the funding with Trillium or funding with the patient assistance program?
Yes.
I don't know that I know the answer to that question. The patient assistance programs typically will, because it's an income tested thing, I'm sure there's some sort of touch base on a regular basis to make sure that nothing major has changed. Trillium's program, it takes an awfully long time in the first place to get approved. I don't see people coming back and saying, oh my gosh, I got 6 weeks worth of, gap because Trillium's reassessing everything. They're able to get all of your data presumably through the government anyway, as far as your total costings. So I would think the process itself is not likely to be as extensive as the initial approval, but they may do an annual review as much for that income test as anything else. But I don't know for sure.
Does that answer your question, Mike?
Or not answer your question, as the case may be.
He thumbed up to you, or whatever you call it.
Oh, good. Well, that's good.
All right. Well, that's the end of the questions in chat. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to bring up for Claire? No? You guys are all experts. You're going to go sell this, put it on plans as a preventative approach?
We're careful of experts. An expert to me is somebody who knows less than you do on a given subject, but talks about it with a lot more authority.
Well, thanks for that, Barry. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
I hope everybody has a great day, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks very much. Have a great day, everybody.